Madison Parker walked through the crowded hallways of Lincoln High, her worn black backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds blocking out the chaos around her. She moved like a ghost through the sea of students, completely unnoticed by everyone, except the three girls who had been watching her every move for weeks. What they didn't know was that beneath Madison's quiet exterior lay years of disciplined training that would soon turn their world upside down. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Lincoln High School as Madison Parker stepped out of her father's modest Honda Civic. She adjusted her backpack straps and took a deep breath, steeling herself for another day of invisibility. This was her third week at the new school, and she had perfected the art of blending into the background. "Have a good day, sweetheart," her father called through the open window. David Parker, a soft-spoken man with calloused hands from years of construction work, watched his daughter with concerned eyes. "Remember what we talked about?" Madison nodded without looking back. The conversation had been the same every morning since they'd moved to Millbrook. Stay out of trouble, focus on studies, and absolutely no fighting. The last part stung because David knew exactly what his daughter was capable of, and it terrified him. Inside the school, Madison navigated the hallways with practiced precision. She had memorized every route, every hiding spot, every teacher's schedule. Her strategy was simple: remain invisible, graduate, and get out. But invisibility, she was learning, didn't always work. "Look at the little mouse girl," whispered Brittany Richardson, the self-appointed queen of Lincoln High's social hierarchy. Brittany had everything: money, looks, popularity, and a mean streak that ran deeper than the Grand Canyon. She stood by her locker with her two loyal followers, Chloe Martinez and Amber Stevens, all three of them watching Madison like predators eyeing their prey. Chloe, a tall redhead with sharp features, leaned closer to Brittany. "She's been here 3 weeks and hasn't said a word to anyone. What's her deal?" "Probably thinks she's too good for us," Amber added, flipping her blonde hair over her shoulder. "Did you see that weird bag she carries? Looks like it's from a thrift store." Brittany's eyes narrowed as she studied Madison's retreating figure. The backpack that had caught their attention was indeed unusual: black canvas with faded patches and what looked like Asian characters embroidered on one side. To them, it screamed weirdo. To Madison, it was a treasured reminder of her training. In her first period biology class, Madison sat in her usual spot, back row, corner seat, perfect view of all exits. She pulled out her notebook and began sketching martial arts forms in the margins, a habit she'd developed to stay focused during boring lectures. The movements flowed from her pencil naturally: high kicks, spinning techniques, defensive stances. "Miss Parker," Mr. Henderson's voice cut through her concentration, "perhaps you'd like to share your artwork with the class." Madison's cheeks flushed as she quickly covered her sketches. "Sorry, Mr. Henderson, I was taking notes." A few students snickered, but Madison kept her eyes down. She had learned long ago that attention was dangerous, especially the wrong kind. What she didn't notice was Tyler Brooks sitting 2 seats away, watching her with genuine curiosity rather than mockery. Tyler was what you might call an accidental target. Not quite popular enough to be safe, not quite invisible enough to be ignored. He was the kind of student who helped others with homework, volunteered for every school event, and somehow always ended up on the wrong side of the popular kids' jokes. His thick-rimmed glasses and slightly too small shirts made him an easy mark. During lunch, Madison found her usual sanctuary, a quiet corner of the library where she could eat her homemade sandwich in peace. She pulled out a worn paperback novel and tried to lose herself in the story, but her concentration was broken by raised voices from the main area. "Come on, Brooks, it's not that hard," a familiar voice taunted. Madison peered around the bookshelf. to see Brittany and her crew surrounding Tyler, who was clutching a stack of books against his chest. "I already told you, I can't help you cheat on the exam," Tyler said, his voice shaking but determined. "It's not right." Brittany stepped closer, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the table. "You know what's not right? Nobody likes you telling me what I can and can't do." Chloe grabbed one of Tyler's books and held it above her head. "Maybe we should see how well these fly." The librarian, Mrs. Chun, was nowhere to be seen, probably on her lunch break. Madison felt her muscles tense, her body automatically shifting into a defensive stance even though she remained hidden. Every instinct told her to intervene, but her father's warnings echoed in her mind. "Please," Tyler said quietly, "just leave me alone." "Aw, look at him," Amber cooed mockingly. "He's about to cry." Madison's hands clenched into fists. She had seen this scenario play out countless times at her old school, and it never ended well for the victim. But this time, something was different. Tyler wasn't backing down completely. There was a spark of defiance in his eyes that reminded her of herself. The confrontation might have escalated, if not for the sudden return of Mrs. Chun. Brittany immediately switched to her sweet, innocent act, helping Tyler pick up his scattered papers, while shooting him a warning look that promised this wasn't over. After school, Madison walked to her part-time job at Kim's Martial Arts Academy, a small dojang tucked between a laundromat and a pizza place on the outskirts of town. The familiar scent of sweat and determination hit her as she pushed through the door. "Madison, ah!" Master Kim's voice boomed across the training floor. Jin Kim was a compact man in his 50s with kind eyes and hands that could break boards or heal injuries with equal skill. He had been her trainer for the past 2 years, ever since her family had moved to Millbrook. "Master Kim," Madison bowed respectfully. "I'm ready for today's session." Good. But first, you look troubled." "What's on your mind?" Madison hesitated. Master Kim had a way of reading people that made it impossible to lie. "There's a situation at school, a student being bullied." "Ah," Master Kim nodded knowingly. "And you want to help but are afraid of the consequences." "My father made me promise not to fight. He's worried about what happened at my old school." Master Kim's expression grew serious. Madison's previous school had been a nightmare, a place where violence was common and her attempts to protect weaker students had earned her a reputation as a troublemaker. The final incident had resulted in 3 bullies hospitalized and Madison facing expulsion. Her father had pulled her out immediately and moved the family across town for a fresh start. "Your father worries because he loves you," Master Kim said gently. "But Taekwondo is not just about fighting. It's about protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to use your power." Madison nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. "What if they push too far? Then you must trust your training and your heart. The way of Taekwondo is to seek peace, but also to stand for justice." They spent the next hour working on forms, the familiar patterns helping to center Madison's mind. Her movements were fluid, powerful, each technique executed with precision that spoke of years of dedicated training. Master Kim watched with pride as she transitioned from one complex combination to another, her body moving with the grace of a dancer and the power of a weapon. "Your technique is excellent," he said as they finished. "But remember, the strongest warriors are those who win without fighting." Meanwhile, across town, Brittany Richardson was holding court in her bedroom, surrounded by her followers and nursing a wounded ego. The incident with Tyler had left her feeling off balance, and she didn't like it one bit. "That little worm thinks he can disrespect me," she fumed, pacing back and forth on her plush carpet. "Nobody says no to me at Lincoln High." Chloe lounged on the bed, scrolling through her phone. "Maybe we should just forget about him. He's not worth our time." "Are you kidding me?" Brittany spun around, her eyes flashing. If we let him get away with this, everyone will think they can walk all over us. No, we need to make an example." Amber, who had been quietly applying lip gloss, looked up. "What did you have in mind?" Brittany's smile was cold and calculating. "Tyler Brooks is about to learn what happens when you cross the wrong people. And maybe his little friend too." "What friend?" Chloe asked, confused. "That weird girl with the ugly backpack. I saw her watching us in the library. They're probably perfect for each other. Two losers who think they're better than everyone else." The three girls spent the next hour plotting, their conversation growing darker with each passing minute. Brittany had a gift for manipulation, for finding people's weaknesses and exploiting them. She had ruled Lincoln High's social scene for 2 years, and she wasn't about to let anyone challenge her authority. The next morning, Madison arrived at school to find Tyler sitting alone outside the main entrance, his backpack torn and his books scattered around him. His glasses were askew, and there was a small cut on his lip. "What happened?" Madison asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tyler looked up, surprised that anyone had noticed him. "Oh, hi, you're in my biology class, right?" "Madison?" She nodded, kneeling to help him gather his things. "Are you okay?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just had a little accident with my locker this morning." Tyler's voice was steady, but Madison could see the anger burning in his eyes. "Seems like someone got creative with a box cutter." Madison's breath caught as she noticed the precise slashes in Tyler's backpack. This wasn't random vandalism, it was a message. And she had a feeling she knew exactly who had sent it. "Tyler," she said carefully, "did you see who did this?" He shook his head. "The lockers were empty when I got here. But I have a pretty good idea." He looked directly at Madison. "You were in the library yesterday, weren't you? You saw what happened." Madison nodded slowly. "I saw." "Then you know this is just the beginning." Tyler stood up, shouldering his damaged backpack. "They're not going to stop until they break me completely." For the first time in weeks, Madison felt something stir inside her, not anger, but determination. She thought of Master Kim's words about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, about the true meaning of strength. "Maybe," she said quietly, "they picked the wrong person to mess with." Tyler looked at her with confusion, but Madison was already walking away, her mind racing with possibilities. She had promised her father she wouldn't fight, but she hadn't. Promised she wouldn't prepare for one. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes and careful observation. Madison watched Brittany and her crew, noting their patterns, their weaknesses, their blind spots. She saw how they operated, always in groups, always targeting the isolated and vulnerable. During lunch, she found Tyler sitting alone again, this time in the cafeteria. She approached his table with her tray, ignoring the curious stares from other students. "Mind if I sit?" she asked. Tyler looked around nervously. "Are you sure? Sitting with me isn't exactly a social upgrade." "I'm not looking for a social upgrade," Madison said, taking a seat across from him. "I'm looking for the truth." Over the next 20 minutes, Tyler told her everything. How Brittany had been targeting him for weeks. How the harassment had escalated since his refusal to help them cheat. How he'd found threatening notes in his locker. Madison listened without interrupting, her respect for Tyler growing with each revelation. "Why don't you report them?" she asked. Tyler laughed bitterly. "To who?" "Brittany's dad is on the school board. Chloe's mom is the PTA president. Amber's family donated money for the new computer lab. These girls are untouchable." Madison felt a familiar fire building in her chest. She had heard this story before. At her old school, the popular kids who thought their status made them invincible, who targeted anyone who didn't bow to their authority. "No one is untouchable," she said quietly. Something in her tone made Tyler look at her more carefully. "Madison, what exactly are you thinking?" Before she could answer, A commotion erupted near the cafeteria entrance. Brittany and her crew had cornered a freshman girl, surrounding her like wolves. The girl was crying, begging them to stop as they mocked her appearance and her family's financial situation. Madison's body moved before her mind could catch up. She stood so quickly that her chair scraped against the floor, drawing attention from nearby tables. Every muscle in her body was coiled, ready to spring into action. "Madison, don't," Tyler whispered urgently. "You'll only make things worse." But Madison was already calculating distances, angles, the most efficient way to neutralize 3 opponents without causing permanent damage. Her training kicked in automatically, her breathing becoming controlled and measured. Then she caught sight of her reflection in the cafeteria window and stopped. Her father's worried face flashed in her mind, along with the promise she had made. She forced herself to sit back down, her hands trembling with suppressed energy. "I can't," she whispered, more to herself than to Tyler. The freshman girl's situation resolved itself when a teacher finally intervened, but the damage was done. Madison had revealed her true nature, not just to Tyler, but to herself. She was a fighter, trained and ready, but bound by a promise that felt more like a chain with each passing day. That evening, at the dojang, Madison threw herself into her training with unusual intensity. She attacked the heavy bag with combinations that would have impressed professional fighters, her kicks generating power that shook the entire apparatus. "You're angry," Master Kim observed, watching her technique. "I'm frustrated," Madison corrected, landing a perfect turning kick that sent the bag swinging. "There's a difference, is there?" "Both emotions cloud judgment. Both can lead to mistakes." Madison stopped punching and turned to face her teacher. "What would you do if you saw innocent people being hurt and had the power to stop it?" "Master," Kim smiled sadly, "I would remember that true power comes not from what we can do, but from what we choose to do. And sometimes, the hardest choice is to wait for the right moment. What if the right moment never comes? Then we make it come." Madison pondered his words as she continued her training. She practiced forms until her muscles ached, worked on speed drills until her reflexes were sharp as razors, and meditated until her mind was clear and focused. She was still thinking about Master Kim's advice when she arrived home to find her father waiting in the kitchen, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. "How was school today?" he asked, the same question he'd asked every day for the past 3 weeks. "Fine," Madison replied, the same answer she'd given every day for the past 3 weeks. But David Parker had raised his daughter for 17 years, and he knew when she was lying. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands unconsciously formed fists when she thought no one was looking. "Madison," he said gently, "I know this is hard for you. Starting over, keeping your head down, but it's for the best." Madison sat across from him, studying her father's weathered face. "Dad, what if keeping my head down means watching other people get hurt?" David's expression grew pained. "Sweetheart, you can't save everyone. You tried that at Riverside High. And look what happened. 3 boys in the hospital, police reports, expulsion hearings. I won't let you go through that again." "Those boys were terrorizing a girl half their size," Madison said, her voice rising. "They had her cornered in the parking lot, and no one was doing anything about it." "And you put 2 of them in the ICU," David shot back. "One of them needed surgery to repair his knee. Do you understand what could have happened if their parents had pressed charges?" Madison fell silent. She remembered that day clearly, the rage that had consumed her when she saw the girl being attacked, the way her training had taken over completely. She had been efficient, brutal, and utterly without mercy. The bullies had never bothered anyone again, but the victory had come at a price. "I'm not that person anymore," she said quietly. "Aren't you?" David asked. "Because when you came home today, you looked exactly like you did that day, like you were ready to hurt someone. Madison wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Her father wasn't wrong. She had been ready to hurt someone. The question was whether that someone deserved it. Later that night, Madison lay in bed thinking about Tyler, about the freshman girl in the cafeteria, about all the victims who suffered in silence because people like her chose to look the other way. She thought about her training, about the years of discipline and sacrifice that had forged her into a weapon. What was the point of all that power if she never used it to protect the innocent? But then she remembered the sound of breaking bones, the sight of blood on concrete, the fear in her father's eyes as he bailed her out of jail. Power without control wasn't strength. It was destruction. As she drifted off to sleep, Madison made a decision. She would continue to watch, to wait, to prepare. But she would also be ready. Because bullies like Brittany Richardson only understood one language, and Madison was fluent in violence. The question was whether she would have to speak it. The next morning arrived with an unseasonable chill that seemed to seep into Madison's bones as she walked through Lincoln High's entrance. She had barely slept, her mind replaying scenarios of confrontation and consequence. What she found waiting for her made her stomach drop. Tyler stood by his locker, staring at something with a mixture of shock and humiliation. As Madison approached, she could see what had captured his attention. His locker had been vandalized with crude drawings and harsh words scratched deep into the metal. But it was what lay scattered on the floor that made her blood run cold. Her backpack, the one with the faded Asian characters, the one that held her most precious possessions, had been slashed beyond repair. The canvas hung in tatters, and her belongings were strewn across the hallway like debris from a tornado. Her Taekwondo manual, the one Master Kim had given her on her first day of training, lay open with pages torn out. Her mother's old fountain pen, a gift from before the divorce, had been snapped in half. "They got yours too," Tyler said quietly, his voice hollow. "I'm sorry, Madison. This is my fault." Madison knelt slowly, gathering the remains of her belongings. Her hands moved methodically, but inside, a storm was building. This wasn't just vandalism, it was a declaration of war. Brittany had made it personal. "How did they get into the lockers?" Madison asked, her voice eerily calm. Tyler glanced around nervously. "Brittany's boyfriend is Derek Walsh. He's on the maintenance crew after school. Has access to all the master keys." Derek Walsh. Madison filed the name away for future reference. She had seen him around. A senior with arms like tree trunks and a swagger that screamed trouble. The kind of guy who peaked in high school and would spend the rest of his life trying to recapture that glory. "Madison," Tyler continued, "maybe we should tell someone. This has gone too far." "Tell who?" Madison stood, cradling her destroyed possessions. "You said it yourself. They're untouchable." But even as she spoke, Madison's mind was working. She was studying the crime scene with the analytical precision Master Kim had taught her. The slashes in both backpacks were deliberate, artistic. Almost. Someone had taken their time and had enjoyed the destruction. The placement of the torn pages suggested they had been looking for something specific. Her Taekwondo manual. During the first period, Madison sat through Mr. Henderson's biology lecture without absorbing a single word. Her thoughts were consumed by strategy, by the chess game that had suddenly become deadly serious. Brittany had escalated beyond typical bullying. She had committed what amounted to an act of terrorism against Madison's identity. When the lunch bell rang, Madison made her way to the library, hoping to find some peace in the quiet stacks. Instead, she found Tyler hunched over a computer terminal, his face illuminated by the glow of the screen. "Research?" she asked, sliding into the chair beside him. Tyler jumped, then relaxed when he saw it was her. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about no one being untouchable." The screen showed a local news article from 3 years ago. Teen martial artist wins state championship. The accompanying photo showed a younger Madison, her hair longer, her face bright with triumph as she held a golden trophy. Madison Parker, Tyler read aloud, age 14, becomes the youngest competitor ever to win the state Taekwondo championship in the black belt division. Madison's stomach clenched. Where did you find this? It wasn't hard. I just searched for martial arts champions in the area. Tyler turned to look at her directly. You're not just some quiet girl who happens to know a few moves, are you? Madison was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she spoke. I haven't competed in 2 years. Why not? Because I learned that winning fights and solving problems are two different things. Tyler leaned back in his chair, studying her face. The trouble at your old school. It had to do with your training, didn't it? Madison nodded slowly. I thought I was helping people. I thought I was making things better. But sometimes when you fight monsters, you risk becoming one yourself. And now? Now I'm wondering if sometimes being a monster is the only way to protect the innocent. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the library entrance. Brittany and her crew had cornered another student, a shy sophomore named Marcus who was known for his stellar grades and complete lack of social skills. Come on, Marcus, Brittany was saying, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We just need you to write a little essay for us. Nothing major. Marcus clutched his textbooks against his chest like a shield. I can't do that. It's cheating. It's not cheating, Chloe interjected. It's a collaboration. Academic assistance, Amber added with a giggle. Madison felt her muscles tense, her body automatically shifting into a combat stance. Beside her, Tyler placed a restraining hand on her arm. Not here, he whispered. Too many witnesses. But Madison was already moving. She stood and walked casually toward the confrontation, her movements loose and relaxed. To any observer, she looked like a student simply browsing the shelves. Marcus, she said, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by the group. Mrs. Chun is looking for you. Something about your research project. Marcus looked confused for a moment, then caught on. All right, I should go see her. Brittany's eyes narrowed as she took in Madison's presence. I don't think we were talking. To you, you weren't, Madison replied, her tone neutral. I was talking to Marcus. The standoff lasted only seconds, but Madison could feel the electricity in the air. Brittany was measuring her, trying to determine if Madison was a threat or just another sheep. Madison let her wonder. Come on, girls, Brittany finally said. We'll catch up with Marcus later. As they walked away, Brittany's gaze lingered on Madison. There was something different in her eyes now, not just irritation, but genuine interest. Madison had just made herself a target. That afternoon, Madison arrived at the dojang to find Master Kim waiting for her with an unusual expression on his face. We need to talk, he said, leading her to his small office behind the main training area. The office was sparse but meaningful, certificates on the walls, photos of students who had gone on to successful careers, and a small shrine dedicated to the memory of his own master. Master Kim gestured for Madison to sit, then closed the door. I had a visitor today, he began, a young man named Tyler Brooks. He told me some very interesting things about what's happening at your school. Madison's heart sank. Master Kim, I can explain. He didn't come to get you in trouble, Master Kim interrupted. He came to ask for help, not just for himself, but for you. Madison looked up, confused. For me? He's worried about you, Madison. He says you're being pushed toward a confrontation you're not ready for. I'm ready for anything, Madison said, her voice defensive. Are you? Because being ready to fight and being ready for the consequences of fighting are two different things. Master Kim leaned forward, his eyes serious. Tyler told me about your backpack, about what they did to your manual. Madison's jaw tightened. It was just a book. No, it wasn't. It was a symbol. They attacked what you value most, your training, your discipline, your connection to this art. They're trying to provoke you into revealing your true nature. Maybe it's time I did. And then what? You defeat them physically, and they come back with weapons? With friends? With lawyers? Master. Kim shook his head. Violence is a tool, Madison. But like any tool, it must be used wisely. So what do you suggest? That I just let them terrorize innocent people? I suggest you remember that Taekwondo is about more than kicking and punching. It's about discipline, respect, and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Sometimes the best way to protect someone is to teach them to protect themselves. Madison frowned. You want me to train Tyler? I want you to consider all your options before you choose the path of direct confrontation. Tyler is stronger than. He looks and braver than he knows, but he needs guidance. He needs someone who understands what it means to stand up to bullies. The idea intrigued Madison despite herself. Tyler had shown remarkable courage in standing up to Brittany, even when it meant becoming a target. And there was something in his eyes, a determination that reminded her of herself at that age. What did you tell him? She asked. I told him to come back tomorrow after school. I told him that if he was serious about learning to defend himself, I would consider teaching him. But I also told him that the real teacher would be you. Madison left the dojang with her mind spinning. The idea of training Tyler appealed to her on multiple levels. It would give her a constructive outlet for her energy, and it might provide Tyler with the confidence he needed to stand up to his tormentors. But it also presented risks. Training someone in martial arts was a serious responsibility. If Tyler used his skills inappropriately, if he got hurt, if he decided to seek revenge instead of justice, all of that would be on Madison's shoulders. That evening, she found herself in an unexpected conversation with her father over dinner. Dad, she said, pushing her food around her plate. What if I wanted to help someone learn to defend themselves? David looked up from his own meal, his expression cautious. What kind of help? Teaching them some basic self-defense. Nothing fancy, just enough to feel confident. Madison, we've talked about this. Getting involved in other people's problems. This isn't about getting involved, Madison interrupted. It's about sharing knowledge. About using my skills to help someone who needs it. David studied his daughter's face. This is about that boy, isn't it? The one who's been having trouble at school. Madison was surprised. How did you know about Tyler? I pay attention, sweetheart. I see how you come home, how you look when you think no one's watching. You care about him. He's a good person, Dad. He doesn't deserve what's happening to him. And you think teaching him to fight will solve his problems. Madison was quiet for a moment. I think teaching him to defend himself might give him the confidence to solve his own problems. David considered this. And what about the people who are causing trouble? What happens when they realize he's not an easy target anymore? Then maybe they'll find someone else to pick on. Or maybe they'll escalate. Maybe they'll bring weapons, or more people, or find other ways to hurt him. Madison felt frustration building in her chest. So what's the alternative? He just suffers. In silence. He lets them destroy his self-esteem, his education, his future. The alternative is that he finds adults who can help him. Teachers, counselors, parents. Who won't help him because the bullies are too well connected, Madison finished. Dad, I know you're trying to protect me, but sometimes protection means action. David set down his fork and really looked at his daughter. Madison, I'm not just worried about you getting in trouble. I'm worried about you getting hurt. These aren't just playground bullies we're talking about. These are kids with money, influence, and apparently no moral boundaries. If you cross them, they might come after you in ways you can't fight. Let them try, Madison said, her voice hardening. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, David replied. That attitude, that confidence in your abilities, it's going to get you hurt someday. Madison stood up from the table. Dad, I love you, and I respect your concerns. But I can't just stand by and watch innocent people suffer. Tyler asked. For help, and I'm going to give it to him. Madison, I'm not going to hurt anyone, she said firmly. I'm going to teach someone to defend themselves. There's a difference. David watched his daughter leave the room, and for the first time in months, he felt proud of her. She was still the same girl who had gotten into trouble at her old school, but she was also growing into something more, someone who understood the difference between justice and revenge. The next day at school, Madison found Tyler waiting by her locker, his expression nervous but determined. I talked to Master Kim, he said without preamble. He said you might be willing to help me. Madison looked at him carefully. Tyler, learning martial arts isn't just about fighting. It's about discipline, respect, and understanding your own capabilities. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for whatever it takes, Tyler replied. I'm tired of being afraid. Madison smiled for the first time in days. Then let's see what you're made of. Tyler Brooks had never considered himself athletic. Throughout middle school and into high school, he had been the kid who got picked last for teams, who spent gym class hoping the coach wouldn't notice him trying to disappear into the background. So when he walked into Kim's martial arts academy that Thursday afternoon, his hands were sweating and his stomach was doing gymnastics routines. The dojang was nothing like he had expected. Instead of the flashy commercial gym he had imagined, it was a simple, clean space with worn wooden floors and mirrors that had seen better days. The walls were lined with traditional Korean artwork and certificates, and the air carried the scent of dedication, that particular mixture of sweat, determination, and respect that comes from years of serious training. Madison was already there, changed into a crisp white dobuk that made her look completely different from the quiet girl who sat in the back of biology class. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and when she moved through her warm-up forms, Tyler could see the fluid power that had made her a champion. Tyler, Master Kim called out, his voice carrying easily across the space. Welcome to my school. Are you ready to begin your journey? Tyler nodded, not trusting his voice. Master Kim handed him a white belt and a borrowed dobuk that was slightly too large. First lesson, Madison said as Tyler emerged from the changing room. Martial arts isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming the best version of who you already are. The first hour was humbling. Tyler discovered muscles he didn't know existed as Madison guided him through basic stretches and conditioning exercises. His legs shook during horse stance, his arms burned during push-ups, and his coordination abandoned him completely when they moved to basic footwork. This is harder than it looks, Tyler gasped during a water break. Everything worthwhile is, Madison replied, barely winded despite having demonstrated every exercise alongside him. But you're doing better than you think. I feel like a newborn giraffe trying to walk. Madison laughed, the first genuine laugh Tyler had heard from her. You should have seen me on my first day. I was 8 years old and thought I knew everything about fighting because I'd watched a Bruce Lee movie. Master Kim made me do horse stance for 20 minutes straight. I cried. You crying? Buckets, Madison confirmed. But I came back the next day, and the next, and the next. That's the real secret, not talent, not natural ability. Just showing up. Over the following week, Tyler began to understand what Madison meant. Each day brought new challenges, learning to throw a proper punch without hurting his wrist, executing kicks without falling over, understanding the difference between aggression and controlled power. Madison was a patient teacher, breaking down complex movements into manageable pieces and never making Tyler feel stupid for asking questions. But it was during their third session that everything changed. Tyler was practicing basic self-defense techniques, how to break free from a wrist grab, how to create distance from an attacker, when Madison decided to test his reflexes with a surprise drill. Okay, she said, I'm going to grab your wrist and I want you to break free using the technique we just practiced. Tyler nodded, focusing on the steps Madison had shown him. But when she suddenly lunged forward and seized his arm with surprising force, something unexpected happened. Instead of panic, instead of the helpless feeling he usually experienced when confronted with aggression, Tyler felt a surge of clarity. He twisted his arm in the exact motion Madison had taught him, pivoted his body weight, and suddenly found himself free with Madison slightly off balance. "Excellent," Master Kim called out from across the room. "Tyler, see, you have good instincts." Tyler stared at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. "I did that?" "You did that," Madison confirmed. And Tyler could hear the pride in her voice. "How did it feel? Like I wasn't helpless," Tyler said slowly. "Like I had options." That was the moment Madison knew they were on the right path. It wasn't about creating a fighter. It was about awakening the confidence that had always been inside Tyler, buried under years of being told he was weak. Meanwhile, at Lincoln High, Brittany Richardson was growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of reaction to her escalating campaign against Tyler and Madison. She had expected tears, complaints to teachers, or better yet, for Madison to reveal whatever was different about her. Instead, both targets seemed to be growing more confident by the day. "They're ignoring us," Chloe observed during their usual lunch table gossip session. "Tyler actually looked me in the eye yesterday when I walked past him. And that weird girl," Amber added, "she's different too. She doesn't skulk around the hallways anymore." Brittany's perfectly manicured nails drummed against the table. "We need to up our game. Derek, what do you think?" Derek Walsh looked up from his phone, his expression bored. "I think you're wasting too much energy on a couple of nobodies." "Who cares what they do?" "I care," Brittany snapped. "Nobody disrespects me in my own school," Derek shrugged. "Then do something about it instead of just talking." Brittany's eyes glittered with malicious intent. "What did you have in mind?" "I heard that Tyler Kidd has been going to some karate place after school. Maybe it's time he learned that real fighting isn't like the movies." The suggestion sent a chill through the group. Even Chloe and Amber, who were used to Brittany's schemes, looked uncomfortable. "Derek," Amber said carefully, "we're talking about pranks and social stuff. You're talking about actually hurting someone. Sometimes people need to be hurt to learn their place," Derek replied, his tone casual but his eyes hard. "Besides, if he's learning to fight, then he's asking for a fight, right?" Brittany was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. Part of her knew that Derek's suggestion crossed a line they had never crossed before. But the larger part of her, the part that had never been told no in her entire privileged life, was intrigued by the possibility. "I'll think about it," she said finally. That afternoon, Tyler left the dojang feeling more energized than he had in years. Madison walked with him to the bus stop, their conversation flowing easily as they discussed techniques and philosophy. "Madison," Tyler said as his bus approached, "I wanted to thank you. Not just for the training, but for believing I could do this. Tyler, you're stronger than you know. You always were. You just needed to remember it. What about you? When are you going to remember how strong you are?" Madison was taken aback by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're still hiding. At school, you're still the quiet girl in the back of the class. But here, teaching me, you're completely different. You're confident, powerful, alive. Why don't you let people see that side of you?" The question haunted Madison as she rode home with her father. Tyler was right. She was still living in two worlds, still compartmentalizing her identity. At school, she was invisible to Madison Parker. At the dojang, she was the champion, the teacher, the protector. "Dad," she said as they pulled into their driveway, "what if hiding isn't protecting anyone? What if it's just another form of giving up?" David turned off the engine and looked at his daughter. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about authenticity." About being the same person everywhere I go. And what would that look like? Madison was quiet for a moment. I don't know yet. But I think I'm about to find out. The next day at school brought the answer sooner than Madison expected. She was walking to her locker when she heard a commotion from the parking lot. Through the window, she could see Tyler surrounded by Derek and 3 other seniors she didn't recognize. Madison's training kicked in immediately. She assessed the situation. 4 against 1. Tyler's back against a car with no escape route. Escalating body language that suggested violence was imminent. She was moving before she made a conscious decision, her body flowing through the hallways with predatory grace. By the time she reached the parking lot, Derek had shoved Tyler hard enough to dent the car behind him. Problem here? Madison asked, her voice calm but carrying an undertone that made all 4 seniors turn to look at her. Derek laughed. Just having a conversation with our friend Tyler about respect. Why don't you run along, little girl? I think the conversation is over, Madison replied, moving to stand beside Tyler. Actually, Derek said, stepping closer, I think it's just getting started. Madison felt the familiar calm settle over her, the same feeling she had experienced in competition. Time seemed to slow as she calculated angles, distances, probabilities. 4 opponents, all larger than her, all confident in their physical superiority. They had no idea what they were dealing with. Tyler, she said quietly, never taking her eyes off Derek, when I say run, you run. Get to the main office and bring help. Madison, I'm not leaving you. Trust me, she interrupted. And trust your training. Derek made the first move, reaching out to grab Madison's arm. What happened next would become legend at Lincoln High School. Madison moved like liquid lightning. She deflected Derek's grab with a circular motion that sent him stumbling past her, then pivoted and drove her elbow into the solar plexus of the second attacker. As he doubled over, gasping for air, she spun and caught the third attacker with a perfectly executed turning kick that sent him sprawling. The fourth attacker hesitated, suddenly realizing that his friends were on the ground and the quiet girl from biology class was standing in a fighting stance that belonged in a martial arts movie. Your move, Madison said, her voice still eerily calm. The smart play would have been to back down to help his friends to find a teacher. Instead, fueled by embarrassment and adrenaline, he charged. Madison sidestepped his clumsy attack and swept his legs, sending him crashing to the asphalt. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. Derek was pulling himself upright, his face a mixture of pain and disbelief. What the hell are you? I'm someone who doesn't like bullies, Madison replied. By now, a crowd had gathered. Students pressed against windows, phones recording, voices buzzing with excitement and disbelief. Madison realized that her quiet life at Lincoln High was officially over. Tyler appeared at her side, slightly out of breath. I brought help, he said, gesturing to the approaching security guard. Madison looked at the scene around her, 4 seniors on the ground, dozens of witnesses, and her carefully constructed anonymity in ruins. No going back now, she murmured. Would you want to? Tyler asked. Madison considered the question as the security guard began sorting out the situation. For the first time in 2 years, she had acted without hesitation, without fear, without shame. She had protected someone who needed protecting, and she had done it with skill and precision. No, she said finally. I wouldn't want to go back. The real Madison Parker had finally stepped into the light. The Lincoln High principal's office had never felt smaller. Madison sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, her hands folded calmly in her lap while Principal Watson shuffled through incident reports and witness statements. Her father sat beside her, his jaw tight with a mixture of pride and concern that had been warring across his features since the school called. Miss Parker, Principal Watson began, his voice carrying the weariness of a man who had dealt with too many teenage crises. In my 23 years as an educator, I have never seen Anything quite like what happened in our parking lot today. Madison remained silent, her gaze steady. She had learned from Master Kim that sometimes the most powerful response was no response at all. 4 senior students, all of them significantly larger than you, and according to multiple witnesses. Principal Watson consulted his notes. You defeated all of them in under 30 seconds without sustaining a single injury yourself. They attacked first, David Parker interjected, his voice controlled but firm. Madison was defending herself and another student. Mr. Parker, I understand your position, but we're dealing with a very complex situation here. Principal Watson removed his glasses and rubbed his temples. 3 of those boys required medical attention. Derek Walsh has a dislocated shoulder and a bruised larynx. The parents are upset. Madison finally spoke. Are they pressing charges? Principal Watson looked surprised by the directness of her question. Not at this time, but they're demanding your expulsion. For defending myself. For what they're calling excessive force. Principal Watson leaned forward. Madison, where? Did you learn to fight like that? I've been training in Taekwondo since I was 8, Madison replied honestly. I'm a second-degree black belt. The admission hung in the air like a thunderclap. Principal Watson's eyebrows shot up, and even David looked surprised by his daughter's willingness to reveal her credentials. A second-degree black belt, Principal Watson repeated slowly. Madison, do you understand the legal implications of your training? In the eyes of the law, your hands are considered weapons. Using them against untrained individuals could be construed as assault with a deadly weapon. Madison felt a chill run down her spine. She had never considered the legal ramifications of her training beyond the obvious need for restraint and control. However, Principal Watson continued, after reviewing the security footage and interviewing witnesses, it's clear that you were not the aggressor. Tyler Brooks has also provided a statement detailing the pattern of harassment you both have been experiencing. David leaned forward. What are you saying? I'm saying that while Madison's response was dramatic, it appears to have been justified. The boys who attacked her have a documented history of bullying behavior that we've struggled to address through conventional means. Madison blinked in surprise. You knew they were bullying people? Principal Watson's expression grew uncomfortable. Madison, when you're dealing with students whose families have significant influence in the community, disciplinary action becomes complicated. So you just let them terrorize other students? We document incidents, we issue warnings, we try to work within the system. The system is broken, Madison interrupted, her voice hardening. Those boys hurt people because they knew there would be no real consequences. Principal Watson was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps, but what you did today, it can't happen again. I'm willing to overlook this incident as self-defense, but if there's another altercation involving you, I won't have a choice but to expel you. Madison nodded slowly. I understand. But as they left the principal's office, Madison wasn't thinking about staying out of trouble. She was thinking about Tyler's statement, about the pattern of harassment that had finally been acknowledged, and about the dozens of other students who were still suffering in silence. Word of the parking lot. Incidents spread through Lincoln. High like wildfire. By the next morning, Madison found herself thrust into an unwanted spotlight. Students who had never noticed her before whispered as she passed, some with awe, others with fear, and still others with something that looked like hope. Madison! A voice called out as she approached her locker. She turned to see Marcus, the shy sophomore who had been cornered by Brittany's crew in the library, hurrying toward her with an expression of desperate determination. Hi, Marcus, Madison said carefully. Is it true? He asked, glancing around. Nervously, what are they saying about yesterday? Madison studied his face. What exactly are they saying? That you fought 4 guys and won, that you know martial arts, that you ... He lowered his voice. That you stood up to them. I defended myself and a friend, Madison replied simply. Marcus's eyes lit up with something that looked dangerously like hero worship. Could you teach me? I mean, could you show me how to do what you did? Before Madison could respond, another voice joined the conversation. Me too, said a girl Madison recognized from her chemistry class. I'm Sarah Chun. Brittany and her friends have been making my life hell since freshman year. More students began gathering, drawn by the possibility of finally having someone who could help them stand up to their tormentors. Madison found herself surrounded by faces she had seen countless times, but never really noticed. The invisible kids, the targets, the ones who navigated the hallways with their heads down and their hopes crushed. I can't teach everyone, Madison stammered, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. But you could teach some of us, right? Marcus pressed. Just basic stuff, just enough so we don't feel so helpless. Madison's mind raced. Master Kim's words about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves echoed in her memory, but so did her father's warnings about getting involved, about the consequences of her actions rippling outward in unpredictable ways. Let me think about it, she said finally. As the crowd reluctantly dispersed, Tyler appeared at her side. Popular girl now, he observed with a wry smile. I don't want to be popular. I want to be left alone. Too late for that, Tyler said. You've shown them what's possible. You can't unsee that kind of hope once it's been lit. Madison spent the rest of the day wrestling with the weight of unexpected responsibility. Every face in the hallway seemed to carry a story of suffering. Every interaction felt loaded with the possibility of change or disaster. It was during lunch that Brittany Richardson finally made her move. Madison was sitting in her usual spot in the library when Brittany approached, flanked by Chloe and Amber, but something was different about their usual dynamic. Brittany's confidence seemed forced, and her followers looked genuinely uncomfortable. We need to talk, Brittany said, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. Madison looked up from her book. Do we? You humiliated Derek yesterday. You made me look weak in front of the entire school. I defended myself and Tyler, nothing more. Brittany's mask of composure cracked slightly. Nothing more? You put 4 guys in the hospital. The nurse's office, Madison corrected. And they put themselves there when they decided to attack someone. This isn't over, Brittany said, but the threat sounded hollow, desperate. Madison closed her book and stood, meeting Brittany's gaze directly. Yes, it is. The only question is whether it ends with you walking away or with you learning the same lesson Derek learned. For a moment, the two girls stared at each other across a chasm of completely different worldviews. Brittany, who had built her identity on dominance and fear, versus Madison, who had found her strength in discipline and justice. You think you're so tough, Brittany said finally. But you have no idea what real power looks like. My family has connections you can't imagine. One phone call, and your father loses his construction job. Another call, and that little dojo you train at loses its lease. Madison felt ice form in her stomach. This was a threat she hadn't anticipated, an attack that couldn't be countered. With martial arts skills, you'd destroy innocent people just to get back at me? I'd do whatever it takes to put you back in your place, Brittany replied. Unless ... Unless what? Unless you apologize, publicly, in front of the whole school. Admit that you were wrong to attack Derek and his friends. Promise that it won't happen again. Madison felt the walls closing in around her. Brittany had found her weakness, not fear for her own safety, but concern for the people she cared about. Her father, Master Kim, Tyler, all the students who had looked at her with hope. I'll give you until tomorrow to decide, Brittany continued. Assembly is at 9 a.m. That would be the perfect venue for your apology. As Brittany and her friends walked away, Madison sank back into her chair, her mind reeling. She had won. The physical confrontation, only to face a battle she wasn't sure she could win. That evening at the dojang, Madison found herself struggling to concentrate on her forms. Master Kim watched her with growing concern as she fumbled techniques she had mastered years ago. "Your mind is elsewhere," he observed during a break. Madison told him about Brittany's ultimatum, about the threats against her father and the school. Master Kim listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each detail. "Ah," he said when she finished. "Now you begin to understand the true complexity of conflict. Physical confrontation is simple. There is a winner and a loser, action and reaction. But social warfare, that requires a different kind of strategy. What do I do? You remember that every action has consequences, but so does every inaction. If you apologize publicly, what message does that send to Tyler? To Marcus? To all the students who saw hope in your courage?" Madison hadn't considered that angle. "They'd think I abandoned them. And if you refuse, my father could lose his job, you could lose your school." Master Kim smiled sadly. "Madison, I have been teaching martial arts for 30 years. I have seen students face bullies, abusive parents, gang members, and worse. But the most dangerous opponents are not those who attack with fists. They are those who attack the things you love. So what's the answer? The answer is that there is no easy answer. But there is a right answer, and it rarely involves surrender." As Madison walked home that night, her phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. We all are." She looked up to see Marcus waiting by her bus stop, along with Sarah Chen and 3 other students she recognized as frequent targets of bullying. "We heard about tomorrow," Marcus said quietly, "about what Brittany wants you to do. We wanted you to know," Sarah added, "that we understand if you have to apologize. We know she's threatening your family." Madison looked at their faces, young, scared, but determined. These were kids who had been beaten down for years, who had accepted their role as victims. And now they were offering to sacrifice their one chance at protection to keep her safe. "No," Madison said quietly. "No, you deserve better than that." "Madison," Marcus started. "Brittany Richardson thinks power comes from money and connections, and the ability to destroy what other people love." Madison interrupted. "But real power comes from standing up for what's right, even when it costs you everything." She looked at each of their faces. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., if any of you want to see what real power looks like, be in that assembly." As the students dispersed, Madison felt a familiar calm settling over her. The same feeling she had experienced in the parking lot, in competition, in every moment when she had been forced to choose between safety and justice. That tomorrow would change everything. And for the first time since Brittany's ultimatum, Madison was looking forward to it. The Lincoln High School auditorium buzzed with anticipation as students filed in for the mandatory Friday morning assembly. Word had spread through text messages and whispered conversations that something significant was about to happen. Though most students didn't know exactly what. Madison sat in the 3rd row, her posture straight and her breathing controlled. She had spent the night in meditation, preparing her mind the way Master Kim had taught her before tournaments. This wasn't a physical competition, but it required the same mental discipline and strategic thinking. Tyler sat beside her, his leg bouncing nervously. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered. "No," Madison replied honestly, "but sometimes being sure isn't the point." Behind them, scattered throughout the auditorium, sat the students who had approached Madison over the past 2 days. Marcus clutched a small notebook where he had written down everything Madison had taught him about standing up straight and projecting confidence. Sarah Chun had invited 2 of her younger cousins who attended Lincoln High, both of whom had their own stories of harassment. There were at least a dozen other faces Madison recognized, the invisible kids who had found their voices in her example. Near the front of the auditorium, Brittany Richardson sat with her usual entourage, but the dynamic had shifted. Derek Walsh was absent, still recovering from his encounter with Madison, and his absence left a visible gap in their group's confidence. Chloe and Amber flanked Brittany, but their expression showed uncertainty rather than their usual smugness. Principal Watson took the stage, his expression carefully neutral. Good morning, students. We've gathered today to address some recent incidents that have occurred on our campus and to discuss the importance of conflict resolution and school safety. Madison felt her heart rate increase. This was it. The moment when she would either validate everyone's faith in her or watch it crumble under the weight of Brittany's threats. I'd like to invite Madison Parker to come forward and share some thoughts with us about recent events, Principal Watson announced. The auditorium fell silent as Madison stood. She could feel hundreds of eyes tracking her movement as she walked down the aisle toward the stage. Each step felt weighted with the hopes and fears of everyone watching. As she climbed the steps to the stage, Madison caught sight of her father standing near the back entrance. He had taken time off work to be there, his face a mixture of anxiety and determination. Near the side exit, she spotted Master Kim, who gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. Madison approached the microphone, adjusted it to her height, and looked out over the sea of faces. The silence was absolute. My name is Madison Parker, she began, her voice clear and steady. 2 days ago, I was involved in an altercation in the school parking lot. 4 students attacked me and another student, and I defended us both. A murmur rippled through the audience. This wasn't the apologetic tone everyone had expected. I've been asked to apologize for my actions, to admit that I was wrong, to fight back, and to promise that it won't happen again. Madison paused, letting her gaze sweep across the auditorium. I'm here to tell you why I can't do that. Brittany's face had gone pale. This wasn't the script she had written. For 3 weeks, I watched students in this school live in fear. I watched Tyler Brooks get harassed for refusing to help people cheat. I watched Marcus Chun get cornered for being too smart. I watched Sarah and her cousins get tormented for their family's financial situation. I watched it happen because I was afraid of getting involved, afraid of making waves, afraid of standing out. Madison's voice grew stronger with each word. But fear is a choice. And so is courage. Tyler found himself sitting straighter, his chest swelling with pride. Around the auditorium, other students were leaning forward, hanging on every word. 2 days ago, 4 people decided to use violence to intimidate and hurt someone who couldn't defend himself. They made that choice because they believed there would be no consequences, because they thought it might make right. Madison's eyes found Brittany in the crowd. They were wrong. I am not sorry for defending Tyler. I am not sorry for showing bullies that their victims are not alone. And I am not sorry for demonstrating that courage is contagious. The auditorium erupted. Some students cheered, others gasped, and teachers looked around nervously as the carefully controlled atmosphere dissolved into genuine emotion. However, Madison continued, waiting quietly. I do want to address something important. What I did was dangerous. I had years of training that allowed me to control the situation without causing permanent harm. If you're being bullied, violence should never be your first option. There are teachers, counselors, parents, and programs that can help. She gestured toward Principal Watson. But when the system fails, when adults look the other way because it's easier than confronting difficult truths, then we have to look out for each other. Madison took a deep breath. Some of you have asked me to teach you to defend yourselves. I've decided to start a self-defense club here at Lincoln High, with proper supervision and training. Not to create fighters, but to build confidence. Not to encourage violence, but to show that you have options. Principal Watson's eyebrows shot up. This was the first he had heard of any such club. To anyone who has ever felt helpless, who has ever been made to feel small or worthless or alone, you are not alone anymore. We are stronger together, and we will look out for each other. Madison looked directly at Brittany. To those who think they can rule through fear and intimidation, your time is over. This school belongs to all of us, not just the ones whose parents make donations. She stepped back from the microphone. Thank you. The response was unlike anything Principal Watson had seen in his decades of education. Students leaped to their feet, applauding and cheering. Teachers looked stunned. And in the midst of it all, Brittany Richardson sat frozen, realizing that her carefully planned humiliation had backfired spectacularly. As Madison descended from the stage, students surrounded her. Marcus was grinning from ear to ear, Sarah was wiping away tears of relief, and Tyler looked like he was about to burst with pride. Madison! Principal Watson called out over the noise. We need to discuss this self-defense club proposal. But before Madison could respond, another voice cut through the chaos. Actually, Principal Watson, I think we need to discuss a lot more than that. Everyone turned to see a woman in a business suit walking down the center aisle. She was tall, confident, and carried herself with the kind of authority that commanded attention. I'm Detective Lisa Rodriguez with the Millbrook Police Department's Youth Services Division, she announced. I'm here to investigate reports of systematic harassment and intimidation at this school. Brittany's face went from pale to ashen. Beside her, Chloe and Amber looked like they wanted to disappear. Miss Parker's speech was very illuminating. Detective Rodriguez continued, but I'm more interested in what hasn't been said. I have statements from 17 students detailing patterns of harassment, property destruction, and threats that have been ongoing for years. She looked directly at Principal Watson. I also have questions about why these incidents were never properly reported to law enforcement. The auditorium had gone silent again, but this time the silence carried a different energy. Where moments before there had been excitement and hope, now there was tension and anticipation. Miss Richardson, Detective Rodriguez called out, I'd like to speak with you and your friends first. Brittany stood on shaking legs. For the first time in her life, her family's money and connections couldn't protect her from the consequences of her actions. The badge on Detective Rodriguez's jacket was immune to social pressure and political influence. As Brittany was led from the auditorium, Madison felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find her father beside her, his eyes bright with emotion. I'm proud of you, David Parker said quietly. Your mother would have been proud too. Madison felt tears threatening for the first time since the whole ordeal began. I thought you'd be angry. About the job threats, about putting you at risk, David smiled. Honey, some things are more important than job security. Watching you stand up there, watching you inspire all these kids. That's worth any risk. Master Kim appeared on her other side. The warrior's path is never easy, he said. But you walked it with honor today. As students continued to swirl around them, sharing their own stories and expressing gratitude, Madison realized that something fundamental had shifted. Not just for her, but for the entire school community. Tyler appeared beside them, practically glowing with excitement. Madison, did you hear what Detective Rodriguez said? 17 students gave statements. 17. People who were too scared to speak up before found their courage because of what you did. What we did, Madison corrected. You were the first one brave enough to say no to them. You started this. And you finished it, Sarah Chun added, joining their growing circle. My little cousins want to join your self-defense club. So do half the girls in my grade. Madison looked around at the faces surrounding her. Students who hours ago had been strangers, now united by shared experience and mutual support. This was what Master Kim had meant about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. It wasn't just about individual confrontations. It was about creating a community where bullying couldn't thrive. So what happens now? Marcus asked. Madison thought about the question. Brittany was facing real consequences for the first time in her life. The school administration would have to address their failures. Students who had been silent for years were finding their voices. "Now we build something better," Madison said. "Together." As the assembly finally disbanded and students headed to their classes, Madison felt a sense of completion she had never experienced before. She had found the balance between strength and wisdom, between fighting and protecting, between individual power and collective courage. The quiet girl who had wanted nothing more than to remain invisible had become the catalyst for transformation. And for the first time since her family had moved to Millbrook, Madison Parker felt like she was exactly where she belonged. 3 months later, the Lincoln High School gymnasium buzzed with an energy that would have been unimaginable just a season ago. What had started as Madison's impromptu promise during the assembly had evolved into something far beyond anyone's expectations. The Lincoln Lions Self-Defense Club met every Tuesday and Thursday after school, but today was special. It was their first official demonstration for parents, teachers, and community members. Madison stood at the edge of the mat, watching her students warm up with a mixture of pride and amazement. Tyler executed a perfect sequence of blocks and counterattacks, his movements fluid and confident. The shy boy who had once flinched at raised voices now carried himself with quiet assurance that extended far beyond martial arts. He had become Madison's assistant instructor, helping newer students overcome the same fears he had once faced. "Remember," Tyler called out to a group of freshmen, "confidence starts in your posture. Stand like you belong here, because you do." Madison smiled, recognizing her own words reflected back through Tyler's teaching. Across the mat, Sarah Chun was leading a group of girls through self-defense scenarios, her voice clear and authoritative. Sarah had discovered a natural talent for instruction and was already talking about pursuing a career in law enforcement. "Madison," a familiar voice called from the entrance. She turned to see Detective Rodriguez approaching, no longer in her official capacity, but as a community supporter who had become an unexpected ally. "Detective Rodriguez," Madison greeted her warmly. "I'm glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," the detective replied, watching the students practice. "How many members do you have now?" 43 active members, Madison said, still amazed by the number. "We had to split into 2 sessions, because the gym can't hold everyone at once." Detective Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "And the results?" Madison's expression grew serious. "Bullying incidents are down 70% from last year. But more importantly, reporting is up 200%. Kids aren't suffering in silence anymore." The investigation that had followed the assembly had revealed a pattern of harassment that went far deeper than anyone had imagined. Brittany Richardson had been expelled and was now attending a private school in another district. Derek Walsh had been arrested for assault and was completing community service while attending anger management classes. The ripple effects had extended to several teachers and administrators who had failed in their duty to protect students. "Speaking of results," Detective Rodriguez said, "I have some news about the Richardson family's legal situation." Madison raised an eyebrow. The Richardsons had initially tried to use their connections to minimize their daughter's consequences, but the investigation had uncovered enough evidence to make that impossible. "Brittany's parents are facing charges for intimidation and harassment of witnesses," Detective Rodriguez continued. "Apparently, they made good on some of their threats against other families before we could intervene." The district attorney is not amused. "What about Brittany herself?" "Juvenile court mandated counseling and community service. She'd be working with a nonprofit that supports bullying victims." Detective Rodriguez's smile was grim. Sometimes justice has a sense of irony. Before Madison could respond, Master Kim's voice rang out across the gymnasium. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please." The assembled crowd, parents, teachers, school board members, and local officials turned toward the elderly martial arts instructor who had become something of a celebrity since the club's formation. 3 months ago, Master Kim began, his accent lending gravity to his words. A young woman made a choice that changed this school forever. Today, we see the fruits of that choice. He gestured toward the students who had arranged themselves in demonstration formation. These young people have learned more than kicks and punches. They have learned that true strength comes from protecting others, that courage is contagious, and that standing together makes us all stronger. The demonstration began with basic techniques, proper stances, simple blocks, and controlled strikes. But as it progressed, the display became more sophisticated, showcasing not just physical skills, but the confidence and teamwork that the club had fostered. Marcus, who had grown 3 inches and gained 20 pounds of muscle since joining, performed a breaking technique that would have been unthinkable months ago. The shy sophomore who had once cowered in library corners now commanded attention with his presence. The real test of our training, Madison announced as the formal demonstration concluded, isn't what we can do to our opponents. It's what we can do for our community. She gestured to a banner hanging on the gymnasium wall. Lincoln Lions Anti-Bullying. Initiative minus 127 days without a reported incident. The crowd erupted in applause, but Madison wasn't finished. This club has taught us that everyone deserves to feel safe, to learn without fear, and to be treated with respect. We've learned that being a warrior isn't about fighting. It's about having the strength to protect what matters most. In the audience, David Parker wiped his eyes, overwhelmed by the transformation he had witnessed in his daughter. The quiet girl who had hidden her abilities had become a leader who inspired others to find their own strength. But our work isn't done, Madison continued. We're expanding our program to 3 middle schools in the district. We're partnering with law enforcement to provide safety education. And we're working with the school board to ensure that what happened here never happens again. Principal Watson, who had initially been skeptical of the self-defense club, now stood among its strongest supporters. The program had not only reduced bullying, but had improved school morale and academic performance across the board. As the demonstration concluded and the crowd began to mingle, Madison found herself approached by a woman she didn't recognize. Miss Parker? I'm Jennifer Walsh, the woman said, extending her hand. Madison's mind raced. Walsh, Derek's mother. The woman whose son Madison had hospitalized in the parking lot confrontation. Mrs. Walsh, Madison replied carefully, shaking the offered hand. I wanted to thank you, Mrs. Walsh said, her voice thick with emotion. Madison blinked in surprise. Thank me? For stopping my son before he hurt someone worse than he hurt you. For showing him that actions have consequences. Mrs. Walsh's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Derek had been spiraling for months. The anger, the violence. It was getting worse. What you did, it forced us to get him the help he needed. Madison was speechless. She had never considered that the confrontation might have had positive consequences for Derek himself. He's in counseling now, Mrs. Walsh continued. Real counseling, not just the court-mandated sessions. He's learning to deal with his anger, to understand how his behavior affected others. He wants to apologize to you when he's ready. Mrs. Walsh, you saved my son from becoming something he couldn't come back from. Derek's mother interrupted. I know that sounds strange, given how everything happened. But sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop them from making a mistake they'll regret forever. As Mrs. Walsh walked away, Madison felt a profound shift in her understanding of what had transpired. The confrontation hadn't just been about protecting Tyler or stopping bullies. It had been about breaking a cycle of violence that could have consumed everyone involved. Deep thoughts? Tyler asked, appearing beside her with 2 bottles of water. Just realizing that sometimes the people we fight are victims too, Madison replied, accepting the water gratefully. Derek? Madison nodded. His mother says the confrontation forced his family to get him help. That maybe we saved him from getting worse. Tyler considered this. Master Kim always says that the best fight is the one that ends with everyone becoming better people. Is that what happened here? Tyler gestured around the gymnasium, where former victims were laughing with newfound friends, where parents were talking to their children about courage and community, where the very atmosphere had been transformed from fear to hope. Look around, he said. What do you think? Madison followed his gaze and saw Marcus teaching his younger sister basic self-defense techniques. She saw Sarah Chun deep in conversation with Detective Rodriguez about criminal justice careers. She saw dozens of students who had found their voices, their confidence, their community. I think, Madison said slowly, that sometimes breaking something is the only way to build something better. As the evening wound down and families began to leave, Madison found herself standing with Master Kim in the emptying gymnasium. Are you proud of what you've built here? He asked. Madison looked around at the mats that had become a sanctuary for so many students, at the banners celebrating their achievements, at the evidence of transformation that surrounded them. I'm proud of what we've built together, she corrected. None of this was just me, Master Kim smiled. Spoken like a true teacher. You have learned the most important lesson, that real strength multiplies when it's shared. What happens next? Next, you continue to grow. You continue to teach. You continue to show others that courage is a choice available to everyone. Master Kim's expression grew thoughtful. But you also remember to stay humble. Power without humility becomes arrogance, and arrogance leads back to the very behavior you fought against. Madison nodded, understanding the deeper wisdom in his words. The line between protector and oppressor was thinner than most people realized. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, Madison's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Hi Madison, this is Brittany. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Really sorry for everything. You were right about a lot of things. I hope someday I can be brave like you. B. Madison stared at the message for a long moment, then showed it to Tyler. Are you going to respond? He asked. Madison thought about it, about forgiveness and second chances, about the possibility of redemption, even for those who seemed beyond help. Yes, she said finally, typing her response. Everyone deserved the chance to become better than they were. As they walked out of the gymnasium together, Madison reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a slashed backpack to a transformed school community, from a quiet girl hiding her abilities to a teacher inspiring others to find their strength. The path of the warrior, Master Kim had taught her, was never easy. But it was always worth walking. Behind them, the lights in the gymnasium dimmed, but the foundation they had built together would continue to shine long into the future. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Lincoln High School courtyard. As Madison Parker walked through the entrance for what would be one of her final times as a student. Senior year had brought college acceptance letters, scholarship opportunities, and the bittersweet recognition that her time at Lincoln High was drawing to a close. But today wasn't about endings, it was about beginnings. Madison. A familiar voice called out from across the courtyard. She turned to see Emma Rodriguez, Detective Rodriguez's 16-year-old niece, jogging toward her with a grin that could have powered the entire school. Emma had joined the self-defense club 6 months ago, not because she was being bullied, but because she wanted to be prepared to help others who were. She represented a new generation of students who saw strength not as a tool for dominance, but as a responsibility for protection. Are you ready for today? Emma asked, slightly out of breath. Madison smiled. Are you? Today marked the official launch of the Lincoln Lions Mentorship Network, a program that paired high school students with middle schoolers who were struggling with bullying or confidence issues. It was the natural evolution of everything they had built over the past year. I've been practicing my speech all week, Emma said nervously. What if I mess up? Then you'll be human, Madison replied. The kids we're helping don't need perfection, Emma. They need authenticity. As they walked toward the auditorium, Madison marveled at how different the school felt now. The hallways that had once carried an undercurrent of tension and fear now buzzed with genuine energy and collaboration. Students moved with confidence, teachers smiled more often, and the very atmosphere seemed lighter. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, and it hadn't been without challenges. There had been resistance from some parents who felt the self-defense program was too aggressive, pushback from administrators who worried about liability, and the inevitable growing pains that came with any significant change. But the results spoke for themselves. Lincoln High had become a model for other schools in the district, hosting visitors from education departments across the state who wanted to understand how they had achieved such a dramatic cultural shift. In the auditorium, Madison found Tyler setting up equipment for the presentation. He had grown into his role as co-leader of the program with remarkable grace, his natural empathy making him particularly effective with younger students who were struggling with bullying. The middle schoolers should be arriving any minute, Tyler said, adjusting a microphone. 12 kids from Roosevelt, 15 from Washington, and 8 from Jefferson middle schools. Madison nodded, reviewing the list of student mentors who would be paired with the incoming participants. Each high school student had been carefully selected not just for their martial arts skills, but for their ability to connect with younger students and model positive behavior. Nervous? Tyler asked, noticing Madison's thoughtful expression. Excited, Madison corrected. This feels like the real beginning of something important. The doors opened and the middle school students began filing in, their expressions ranging from curious to apprehensive. Madison recognized the look, the same mixture of hope and skepticism she had once carried herself. Among them was a small girl with thick glasses and a haunted expression that immediately reminded Madison of her own younger self. Her name tag read Lily Chen, Sarah's younger cousin, who had been struggling with harassment at Jefferson Middle School. Welcome, everyone, Madison began as the group settled into their seats. My name is Madison Parker, and a year and a half ago, I was exactly where many of you are right now. She had told her story hundreds of times by now, but she never tired of seeing the spark of recognition in young faces when they realized they weren't alone. I was the quiet girl who ate lunch in the library, who kept her head down, who hoped that being invisible would keep me safe. Madison's voice carried clearly through the room. I was also someone who had been trained in martial arts since childhood, but I was afraid to use those skills because I didn't want to cause trouble. A hand shot up from the middle of the group. A boy who couldn't have been more than 13, with the kind of earnest expression that suggested he took everything seriously. Yes, Madison encouraged. If you knew how to fight, why didn't you just beat up the bullies right away? He asked. Madison smiled. It was always one of the first questions, and it was important to answer honestly. Because fighting isn't the goal, she explained. Fighting is what happens when all other options have been exhausted. The real goal is creating a community where fighting isn't necessary. She gestured to Tyler, who stepped forward. When Madison and I first met, Tyler said, I thought my only options were to suffer in silence or somehow become tough enough to fight back. Madison showed me there was a third option, learning to stand up for myself and others in ways that actually solve problems instead of just creating new ones. Emma raised her hand. What's the difference? Tyler's expression grew thoughtful. When you fight out of anger or revenge, you usually make things worse. When you act from a place of protection and justice, you make things better for everyone. Madison watched the young faces processing this concept. It was sophisticated thinking for middle schoolers, but she had learned that kids were capable of far more wisdom than adults often gave them credit for. Today, you're going to be paired with a high school mentor, Madison continued. Over the next 3 months, you'll meet weekly to work on confidence building, basic self-defense techniques, and most importantly, developing the kind of relationships that make bullying impossible. She looked directly at Lily Chun. The most powerful thing you can learn isn't how to throw a punch. It's how to build a network of friends and allies who have your back. As the pairing process began, Madison found herself assigned to mentor Lily, which felt like more than coincidence. The young girl was quiet but observant, her eyes tracking every movement with the intensity of someone who had learned to watch for threats. "Lily," Madison said gently, "tell me about what's been happening at your school." Lily's story was heartbreakingly familiar: social isolation, verbal harassment, destruction of personal property. But there were also differences that spoke to how bullying had evolved with technology and social media. "They created a fake social media account using my pictures," Lily said quietly. "Posted things that made me look stupid, then tagged everyone in our grade so they'd see it." Madison felt her jaw clench. Digital harassment added layers of complexity that hadn't existed during her own struggles. "Have you told any adults about this?" Lily shook her head. "My parents don't really understand social media. And the teachers at school say it's not their problem because it didn't happen on campus." Madison made a mental note to discuss digital bullying policies with Principal Watson. The program needed to evolve to address new forms of harassment. "Lily, can I show you something?" Madison asked, pulling out her phone. She navigated to a group chat called Lincoln Lions Alumni Network, a support system that had emerged organically among former club members who had graduated or moved on to other schools. "This is Marcus," Madison said, showing Lily a recent message. "He graduated last year and is now a freshman at State University. He still checks in with current club members and offers advice when people are struggling." She scrolled to another message. "This is from Sarah, Lily's older cousin, who's now studying criminal justice and working part-time with the police department's youth outreach program." Lily's eyes widened. Sarah did all that. Sarah discovered that her experiences with bullying gave her unique insights into helping other victims, Madison explained. "Sometimes our worst experiences become the foundation for our greatest contributions." As the session progressed, Madison watched Lily begin to open up, sharing more details about her situation and asking increasingly thoughtful questions about self-defense and confidence building. "Madison," Lily said during a break, "do you think I could ever be brave like you?" Madison knelt down to meet Lily's eyes directly. "Lily, you're already brave. You're here, you're talking about your problems, you're willing to learn new skills. That takes tremendous courage, but I don't feel brave." "Neither did I," Madison admitted. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear." As the mentorship session concluded and the middle school students prepared to leave, Madison felt a familiar sense of purpose settling over her. This work, helping young people find their strength, building communities of support, creating systems that prevented bullying rather than just responding to it. This was what she wanted to do with her life. "Madison," Tyler said as they cleaned up the auditorium, "I got my acceptance letter from the education program at State yesterday." Madison grinned. "Tyler, that's amazing. You're going to be an incredible teacher. What about you? Have you decided?" Between the criminology program and the nonprofit management track, Madison had been wrestling with that decision for months. Both paths offered ways to continue the work they had started, but in very different contexts. "I think," she said slowly, "I'm going to double major. Criminology to understand the systemic issues that create bullying environments, and nonprofit management to build organizations that can address those issues." Tyler nodded approvingly. "Sounds like you found your mission." "We found our mission," Madison corrected. "This doesn't work without people like you, Emma, Sarah, Marcus, everyone who's chosen to use their strength to lift others up." As they left the school together, Madison's phone buzzed with a text from Master Kim. Proud of you, as always. Remember that teaching others to fish feeds them for a lifetime." Madison smiled, understanding the deeper message. The self-defense club, the mentorship network, all of it was really about giving people the tools to help themselves and others. 6 months later, Madison would receive a letter from Lily Chun, describing how she had used the confidence techniques they practiced to stand up to her bullies, how she had helped another student who was being harassed, and how she had started her own peer support group at Jefferson Middle School. A year after that, Madison would read a newspaper article about Tyler's innovative teaching methods and his success in creating positive classroom environments where bullying simply couldn't take root. And 5 years in the future, Madison would stand before a conference of educators and law enforcement officials, sharing the story of how one slashed backpack had become the catalyst for transforming an entire school district's approach to bullying prevention. But today, walking out of Lincoln High School as the sun set behind them, Madison Parker was simply a 17-year-old girl who had learned that the greatest strength comes not from what you can do alone, but from what you can inspire others to do together. The quiet girl who had once hidden her abilities had become a leader who helped others discover theirs. And that, Madison realized, was the most powerful martial art of all, the ability to transform weakness into strength, fear into courage, and isolation into community. Behind them, Lincoln High School stood as proof that change was possible, that courage was contagious, and that sometimes the most important battles are won not with fists, but with open hands extended in friendship and support. The story that had begun with destruction had become one of creation, and its ripple effects would continue long after. Madison Parker had moved on to new challenges and greater adventures. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.